seems it wants to do. But we should not go back and recreate the banking system that got us into this mess in the first place. So, you know, I didn't think I'd ever hear myself saying something like this. But, you know, is it in the best interest of an economy to have a banking sector that's just going for profit maximisation at all costs? I think we've got to look at the banking system and make sure that it's controlled in such a way that businesses, individuals have access to credit at a reasonable rate and at reasonable charges. So in other words, we have to get rid of this usury model of banking. So that's the sort of more fundamental issue about banking, but I suppose the immediate problem is, you know, Mark was talking about the unwillingness of banks to lend money. You know, and the statistics that are thrown out, you know, 8 in 10 have been approved and so on. You know, I totally agree with everything Mark has said, but I also think there's an important point to remember. It's not that banks are unwilling to lend money, it's that they are not able to lend money. Our banking system is insolvent, that's the reality. Some more insolvent than others. You know, Bank of Ireland would be one of the relatively stronger ones at the moment, but AIB is a total mess. Anglo-Irish Bank is obviously a total mess, and so on. So the banks are insolvent, they don't have the money to lend, and that's why, you know, it's an absolute priority to recapitalise the banking system. But it's going to cost a fortune. And, you know, earlier this week, when we got the Anglo-Irish results, the 8.3 billion loss in the first quarter of the year, the cost of Anglo Rescue has been revised up to 24 billion by government. They were telling us a year ago it was 4 billion. And I think we can be pretty certain that by the time it runs its course, it'll be around 35 billion. And the whole debate has started. Brian Lucy in the Irish Times today was arguing that it's time that we let the bondholders in Anglo go swing, that, you know, we shouldn't guarantee the payments back to those bondholders because they invested in bonds in a bank. By definition, they're taking a risk. The problem with that logic is that it's very difficult to differentiate the bondholder from the depositor. You know, if you refuse to pay back bondholders, I think you put yourself in a position where you're going to have to refuse to pay depositors. And I don't think that's somewhere we can go. So the Anglo thing is a total mess. It's going to cost a fortune, but it has to be sorted. I suspect that the best solution is the one that the Department of Finance mooted over the last couple of days, and I suspect the Department of Finance is just being told this by the European Commission. The best approach is to wind Anglo-Irish Bank up over the next decade to spread out the cost of the rescue, because as an economy we just can't afford to take it all on in one fell swoop. But anyway, that's the banking sector. We need to sort it, we need to get credit flowing, and I really do believe there has to be a strong argument for setting up a bank specifically to look after the SME sector of the economy, a little bit like the old ICC model. Government throw 2 or 3 billion into a bank and create a small SME bank on that basis. The third issue is, you know, where are the jobs going to come from in the economy? I feel like Dr. Death over the last couple of years, you know, going around doing presentations, telling the same depressing old story. But one thing that does depress me is when you look at the Irish economy on a sectoral basis and you try and figure out over the next 4 or 5 years where are the jobs going to come from in the economy. You know, the financial services sector certainly will not be creating jobs and is going to contract a lot further. The construction sector is dead, and given the excess supply of construction product around the country and the cutbacks we're seeing in the government capital budget, the construction sector is not coming back. The retail sector, you know, is going through a difficult correction. I suspect it's sort of having overshot on the upside, is moving back to now what would be regarded as the sort of retail size that's suitable for our economy, but it's not going to be a big job creator. So identifying the sectors where the jobs are going to come from is going to be very difficult. You know, I believe that we've got to take a strategic approach, look at things we're good at, and try and create an environment where those sectors can thrive and prosper. I would be kind of obsessive about the whole agri-food industry. I think it offers tremendous potential. We're good at it. Tourism is a product that we have not exploited fully. We need to up the ante, up our game in terms of tourism. We need to look at culture and heritage, something that's a little bit unique to Ireland. I think something we can exploit. The multinational presence will remain very important, but it would be naive to believe that we're going to have big multinational companies creating 1,000, 2,000 jobs in this country over the coming years. Those days are gone. The environment has changed. Those multinationals are now going to India, China and so on. They ain't going to be coming to Ireland. The only multinational jobs we'll be getting are 10, 20, 30, 40 jobs being created over a 2 or 3 year period. So we cannot build our economic model on the back of multinationals, as we did very successfully back in the 80s and the 90s. But still, we should try and protect the multinational sector we have, because it is important. So we need to look at those sectors and create the environment where those sectors can thrive and prosper. I also think that actually something like education, we as a country are quite good at education, but we can turn it into a major service export. I have argued for years, and I'm accused of being extremely naive, but I don't see why, with correct investment, that Ireland couldn't create a Harvard or a Massachusetts Institute of Technology in this country and get thousands of students coming in from overseas. We can build an education model because we are pretty good at it. So we need to identify the sectors. We need to create the environment where those sectors can thrive and prosper. And in that regard, I think I'm almost over time. In that regard, the other thing we need to be very firm about is restoring the competitiveness and reputation of the economy. We allowed the cost base of the country to get totally out of control during the madness of the Celtic Tiger period. We need to use this recession to get the cost base back down to become more competitive. And I'm talking about all costs: wages, local authority charges, commercial rates, commercial rents, professional fees. I'll end up hitting everybody in the audience, but we need to get the cost base of Ireland back down. We also need to address areas of non-cost competitiveness. Investment in education and training in people is vital, because the one thing that could differentiate us in the future as an employer, as a country, is the quality of the labour force we offer. So skimping on education would be disastrous in the long term. We need to invest in the IT infrastructure, because our IT capability is still pretty abysmal. And yet we hear all this guff about smart economy, about knowledge economy. We speak it, we actually don't act it. We need to. The physical infrastructure actually is one area that we have got pretty right over the last number of years. I mean, the whole road infrastructure has made a major difference and will eventually, I think, pay huge dividends in terms of facilitating economic activity around the country. And finally, the role of government in all of this should be to facilitate those activities, not be the driver of those activities itself. Unfortunately, government over the last 10 or 15 years has become too deeply ingrained in the economy, and like the banks, government started to believe that it was a wealth creator as well. It's not. It's a facilitator of economic activity. Its role should be to create the environment where entrepreneurs can get out there and do what entrepreneurs do best. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope it hasn't been too depressing, but it is a pretty stark reality out there. We've got the public finances for the end of August out this evening. Brian Lenihan is out saying, there are signs that we're starting to improve, we're stabilising, we're in line with the targets. Those targets were set incredibly low, and we're achieving targets, but the public finance crisis is still a crisis that we've got to address. We can't become complacent about it. So thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot, Jim. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions coming from that.